right, I'd like to read this poem written by Ella Wheeler Wilcox as our prayer to open this morning. Okay. Things that count. Now, dear, it isn't the bold things, great deeds of valor and might that count the most in the summing up of life at the end of the day, but it is in doing of old things, small acts that are just and right, and doing them over and over again, no matter what others say, in smiling at fate when you want to cry, and in keeping at work when you want to play. Dear, those are the things that count. And dear, it isn't the new ways, where the wonder seekers crowd, that lead us into the land of content or help us to find our own. It is in keeping to true ways. Though the music is not so loud, and there may be many a shadowed spot where we journey along alone, in flinging a prayer at the face of fear, and in changing into a song, a groan. Dear, these are the things that count. My dear, it isn't the loud part of creeds that are pleasing to God, nor the chant of a prayer or the hum of a hymn or a jubilant shout or song. But it is the beautiful, proud part of walking with faith shown, and in loving, loving, loving through all, no matter how things go wrong. In trusting ever, though dark the day, and in keeping your hope when the way seems long. Dear, these are the things that count.
Amen.
Amen. And I think some of the readings today, or I think as we move through Philippians, I think this is what Paul is saying to the Philippians, to hold on to the things that count, to hold on to those things. Oh, we have music to accompany.
We're not playing.
We are going to be doing chapters 6 and 7, synergy and light and darkness. So chapter 6. I'd like to start by the
Light and darkness is 7.
61. I'd like to start by reading the Philippians piece that he centers chiefly on today's chapter. Is there someone who would read? It's written on the top of your handout for today, or you may read it from your Bible, Philippians 2, verses 12 and 13.
I can do it.
Thank you.
Therefore, my beloved, just as you have always obeyed me, not only in my presence, but much more now in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who is at work in you, enabling you both to will and to work for his good pleasure.
Love that.
And so he ties this little verse, kind of well known. I think that part, enabling us both to will and to work, is, working out our salvation with fear and trembling. That's an expression we use quite a bit.
But fear, this fear is not like a fear. It's like an awe.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think it's terrible that children are taught that fear.
Yeah.
You should be a scared, be afraid of God. Like that's not what
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm so pretty dang about it. I think my hands are too frozen up.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Mona has a haunted phone, needs an exorcism.
Alex over.
That's okay. It's okay. So his title for the chapter is Synergy. And I was recalling that it may be Stephen Covey. It may have been, I don't know. What are the other kind of, management consultant gurus from this early century who talked about synergy and, the idea is synergy is, unity plus energy, right? Syn from the Greek,
Think.
like sync, like yes, unity, to be with one, to be one with. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Did you come in on your cross-country skis?
You did?
You look like it. You look like you did.
It is.
Or there's,
One, this one,
that one is a poem, and is there a poem there? Here, you can have the poem. The rest was from previous ones.
thank you.
There you go. All right,
It's the same one.
no, then that, you don't need that. You need this.
And, I'll just listen.
Okay. So, this is kind of a carryover from the previous chapter. This understanding of what is our part and what is God's. How hard is that for us? What is our part and what is God's? And this is a group of very able people who have managed to do many things in their lifetime. You know, we can get very tied up in what is our part.
Oh, yeah. And what is
We
God's
take
part?
care of God's
Is that
part.
he will do his part.
Yeah.
Part of it, just asking.
Yeah, but we have a hard time letting him do it.
What is our first response? I can
Trying to
handle
help.
that.
Yeah.
I can do that.
I can do that. I can do that. Because sometimes, then the act was the turning over of our will can seem, what? Like
Impossible.
or like we don't care, or that it's, like a malaise, or it's, or that, we aren't involved or interested, right?
So that we're just saying, well, I can't do it.
I can't do it, I got it.
God'll do it.
Right, and that sounds
Just
like we don't care enough. When in fact, maybe, but is that what we're really doing?
Right.
So we have to, so our motives, of course, are always under question. But this does take us, I think Ginger said it, back to prayer, and how might we make those decisions about what is our part and what is God's part. The text, I mean, the Philippians text, according to Bishop Little, does give us insight into that. Like, what is it that we are supposed to do? But I think it's good to know that both parts are needed. God relies on us to be God's hands and feet. That old piece of poetry from Teresa of Avila. God has no hands and feet but ours.
I think we have to remember that God is at work in us. And we don't have to think, I can do it, I don't need God. That's the way it sounds sometimes when I look back on it.
Yeah,
I do need God.
yeah.
we know God can do it and we can't, but we still fret and hang on to it. As though we have to do it. Even though we would say, you know, I can't do it, I have to let God do it, we can't let go so often. Because the word is trust. If we could trust Him, we could let it go. Especially if we're talking about a person we love.
And his point being, we've done a pretty crappy job at unity, which is, remember that was the last chapter, was on unity. And then we think about the fractures in the Christian church alone.
Yeah.
We've done a pretty bad job at unity, if that's what unity means. So sometimes, what we think it means is maybe not exactly what it means, but what does it mean in God? And that maybe this synergy is a way to achieve unity. I think maybe that's a circular argument. I guess, I get that, but I'm wondering how they're connected. That somehow in this working out our salvation with fear and trembling, leads us toward that place of unity. I'm just thinking that how else would we get there? We struggle. We struggle politically, socially, culturally, familial, family-wise. We struggle with unity and understanding what it means. And if indeed this little verse from the second chapter of Philippians could help us with that. If synergy is one of the keys.
I think so.
Well, I mean, he writes it in a way that makes it convincing. I'll give you that. It's not that I'm disagreeing with him at all. I am just trying to say what stands in our way of that. What is it that comes up between us and that?
Pride.
Yeah, it might be one thing. My way is better.
Yeah.
Ego. So being a person.
Being a human being.
Being a human being. I don't know what God's design plan is.
I guess he had to put that big flaw in us to try to get us to learn and depend on him. If we didn't need him, we wouldn't seek him.
Okay, so go ahead, David.
Well, individuality, I think there's always you're gonna show differences among people. If we were all alike, we'd be bored. That's why my mom said, variety is the spice of life.
Being boring is a sin.
And yet it is the very thing that troubles us. It is the very thing that troubles us.
What?
The differences. That's the very thing that troubles us.
I
Right,
think
so,
that the differences are not just spice, they're also different people have different talents, bring different things to the table. And if you use them well, use everybody's talents, you're much stronger. Remember, Lincoln there was a book about Lincoln's, what was it called? Lincoln's cabinet of rivals. He had different people. He had rivals on his cabinet, but they all had different strengths, and he was trying to use all those different strengths, even though some of them were with rivals. And I think that's a great example of using differences to make one stronger.
I know, and I've read parts of that, and so in the rivals, approaching a problem. The rivals were like, I'm an abolitionist and you're not.
Yeah.
And there were strong differences on that cabinet. And then in terms of how one would end slavery, right? Like, how would that happen? And not all of them even thought it should be. So you're right, he did try to have all voices heard, which is a little different sometimes in the way we do business today, isn't it? Often. I don't want to get down the politics trail, but just saying, we're kind of afraid to hear the voices that differ.
Well, it wasn't just listening to the voices, it was bringing the differences together in a way that made for a better solution, you took advantage of different strengths. So I'm not coming from a political standpoint when I say that, believe me, but
I hear that.
I've actually experienced some pretty key things along that same line that have made some powerful differences by getting different kinds of people involved. And so I very much believe that's a lot of what he's talking about here. None of us as humans have all the necessary talents we don't have all the necessary perspectives.
Eyes, but if, perception is reality, and if I'm gonna view compromise as, I gave up, or he won, then that's gonna make me not inclined to want to compromise. But, that's what it takes, and that's what I don't think we're seeing enough of.
Yeah, well, here, the idea is that there's a common goal, right? What is that common goal?
We're on the same side. That's what I want to
It's
say.
salvation, right? That's the common goal here. is salvation.
I'm down on,
Go ahead, no.
down on page like 63.
Uh-huh,
I had to read that last paragraph like
Oh,
30
yes.
times. And I'm sure not, still not sure exactly what he's saying.
Okay. So about salvation?
Yeah,
Okay, so, he was just saying salvation is both, an end result in terms of that, means you get some kind of afterlife, but also salvation, as we live our day-to-day life. You know, like when someone says, are you saved? Meaning, are you, gonna go to heaven at the end of this life? But maybe more than that. Have you done what you need to do? Okay, so that part, and then there's nothing wrong with that, he says, and our eternal dwelling place is no small matter, but it could be something more than that. It doesn't mean avoiding hell, but it is also God's intention for our lives. So this is that last paragraph, Kate, there on 63.
63.
Yeah, come and lay down, this is the jar story, so that she may be made well and live. So the phrase made well translates into a form of salvation, the Greek word, made well. That is God's hope for us, that our lives would also be made well on this side of the grave, be made well.
And not necessarily physically.
Not necessarily physically, right, yeah. In Jairus' case, for his daughter, yes, of course, but that was made physically so she could participate in her family life and in her community.
Well, that could still be not fit.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what Paul says about salvation is that he's telling us that we need to live out the implications of our salvation, and our salvation is what God's intention is for our lives. So it's more than just kind of a passive kind of a thing. I think it's it's our own cause to do what God wants us to do to further the kingdom of God.
Unfortunately, our connection is not working really well, Herb, so we missed that pearl of wisdom from you about Paul.
Last part.
Can you repeat it? We'll see if our connection is any better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir?
I was saying that what Paul is saying, that we need to live out the implications that our salvation imposes upon us. And our salvation, he says, is God's intention for our lives. It's not just not going to hell. It's
Right.
God's intention, which involves, to me, using the talents and all the many blessings that God gives us for the purpose of furthering, advancing the kingdom of God.
Yes.
So it's not a passive kind of a thing that says, oh, well, let's not go to hell. Let's be nice. I think it's a call to action to use what he gave us.
There we go. Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah. So something that we should always be considering. How is God's purpose being worked out in us at this moment for the kingdom of heaven? If we refer to our experience of God as, taking it from the gospel, that the kingdom is neither low here or low there. The kingdom is among us, right? So then how are we participating in that? So you don't have to see it, I think, as often we can go into despair, right? The opposite of joy is despair, in my opinion.
Are you calling out?
That's a great reason.
Makes you dance.
In real time.
Yeah, like today.
Yeah.
In your life.
Yeah.
And if I went around the room, if I was, we could, I'm not sure that you could you articulate that?
And what was it?
How is God working out, how are you working out your own salvation at this moment? With God,
Sitting right here.
today. How do we do that? What is that? I mean, they're words on a page, it's a concept, it's a theology, I get that, but it's also real. Because you all have lives that you're living, and so,
And I think that it boils down to one word to me. Basically, now there are other words that I would probably, want to throw in there, but trust. If we can live our lives trusting God, that just takes care of all the issues that come up. I mean, the more we can trust, the more secure and joyful our lives can be. Because if we stumble up over every hump in the road, and think we're the only ones that can smooth it, work it out, it does lead us there. Because we can't do that.
So you think it's just trusting God about the people around you? You need to be able to trust them too, right?
Yeah, to build trust with each other, that's true. And, that involves a lot of forgiveness and a lot of, pain a lot of times. But as we trust God and work out those things through Him, that can be done.
because there is this, since we've chosen this verse for this chapter, the fear and trembling part means there will be struggle. There's no doubt about it. We live a human existence, there will be struggle. There's just no doubt. But I love that phrase, we have been saved. Jesus' work is done in that sense. That salvific moment happened and we are a part of it.
But he's at work in the daily duties.
I hope so, right?
I hope so too, I'm counting on him.
Right.
Yeah. That's what, in my new change of life, I'm counting on him, because he is at work in me.
He certainly
I'm
is, and we
going
can all
on a
see
new
that.
adventure, and this is gonna be wonderful.
Yeah.
Because you're being positive, and you're looking.
Yeah,
I know God's at work, and, yeah, God's at work, he's gonna bend me the right way.
Even though I will struggle against him
Lynn.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Don't you encounter people though, who ask, have you been saved? Or you say, I've been saved. People are really uncomfortable with that phrase, I think.
And because a lot of times what we hear them meaning, people who ask that question of somebody are usually people who are, want to put you in some kind of, straitjacket that.
No,
We
they
don't
want
see
you to
it
be
that
in
way.
their,
I mean,
their
yes, I'm
church,
saved,
because
there's
their
no
church
doubt
is
about
the
it.
only one that's gonna
In
be
their club.
saved.
Yeah.
You
I
might like to say, well, I don't think you're saved, but I know I'm saved.
Yeah, maybe so.
No matter what I
It's just,
appear.
I don't really think it's anybody's business.
I know, absolutely.
No, because it does say work it out with God, right? That's
Yeah.
where it's not with my,
Nobody's
it's
business.
not,
Yeah.
but, it makes us uncomfortable because it feels like, or it seems that there might be a formula by which we will be saved. A formula. Accept Jesus Christ in your heart. Now, we're gonna renew our baptismal covenant on Sunday. We say basically those words. We add, do you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior?
Yes.
It's not language that we use at dinner parties. No, right? But it is language of the church.
Right.
So that's what's important to us, is that we do believe the same things. We might have the order might be slightly different. The emphasis might be slightly different. How we speak about it might be slightly different. But we say, I accept Jesus Christ and turn to him and give, and with my whole body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah.
As my Lord and Savior. We use those words.
Yeah.
But there is some manipulation.
Yeah.
And I think we are keen to feeling manipulated.
And judging.
And judging people. So that's the reason I think it rubs up against us. Because it feels manipulative, because I think it has been used to manipulate.
yeah.
Or it was very convicting for me one time. We're doing a Baltimore study, and one of my good buddies said, "Oh, does it really help
She wasn't saying any of Genesis, frankly, it made me feel like. I'm not doing a good job. Does it really help me, does that going to Bible study, you know, every Thursday or whatever? No, and I was like, no, I'm not shining his light. I'm not one,
Shining his light. Well, Beth Moore has a particular way of reading the gospel and the particular way of asking you to interpret the gospel, right? And so sometimes in our lives, those sort of things anyway, and not just her Bible studies, any kind of Bible study or any kind of teaching can either not speak to us or not, not enlighten us or not move us. Or this book might not be doing it for people. I get that. Right. So where we are and how we are moving, how we working out our fear and how we are working out our salvation. Right. Different kind of experience. Right. I like to do it in community because that's the only way I can figure it out. I can't do it on my own. I already know that. When I'm on my own, I go way somewhere else I ought not to go.
Jesus says, without me, you can do nothing.
That's it.
not believe it.
Right? All right. So anyone else about maybe how you're working out your salvation in this particular moment?
I think in this parish, we do a lot. I mean, think about all the outreach work that we do, just as an example. That's not the only thing, but we are active. We are taking God's call to do this, to help others.
ELL is a good example.
ELL, there's many examples. I wasn't trying to exclude any of them, but there are many examples. And I think, so to me, we have to listen to God. We have to listen to our call. We have to listen to we have to look for where the needs are. We have to look for, we have to do a lot of things like that. We have to try to understand our own selves. Where are our talents? What can we do? Who are people that we need to help us? That sort of thing. Lord, God's going to help us. The trust has got to be there. But we have to be more active than simply trusting God.
Yep, that's what the chapter is about. It's about those two things coming together.
Right.
Yeah.
So simply trusting God is not what this is about. That's an element of it, but it's much more than that, I think.
Yeah. But I think if you do a lot of good works without that underlying, relationship with God, it becomes sort of social gospel where, I hear you, Irvin, I agree. There's no doubt that trusting God is not enough. I mean, as we trust, the result of that is to be out looking for what He wants us to do, I think. But I think that, to me, that comes first. It's a foundation from which we do our work. Anyway.
And I don't think there's not a balance in sense of so much of it's not a recipe, right? Like if you're over on your own action and less on God's action, or over relying on God's whatever it is, it's not there isn't a formula for it. I mean, He's giving you the outline of that. This is a partnership, and even in a marriage or a friendship or anything, sometimes you're giving more and sometimes the other is giving more. That's the way it works, isn't it? It's not like, well, I guess you could keep a ledger and you could decide, where are you today? But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that it takes both parties. There's an engagement. So faith in action, which is the church's, motto there.
Mission. It's a mission, not a motto.
Mission statement. That makes sense. Those two things are working together. And that, I think, is how we're going to work toward whatever the goal is. He chose salvation because it was the goal to which Paul spoke to the Philippians, right? How was the church in Philippi going to understand what it meant for their salvation, particularly in this last little bit of thing.
Allison,
Yeah,
when after I strayed away from the Catholic Church at 18, a friend of mine and I decided that we were gonna look into this Presbyterian church as in my probably mid-20s. And, so we attended some classes. Her father had been a Methodist minister all of his life. And so we were gonna look into this, and so it was the day that, we were to be received. And there was this circle of men, and all the people that were gonna be received, which was maybe about 10 or 12 of us, were in the center. And they were surrounding us. I don't remember, I didn't stick with the Presbyterian church.
It was the
Are
session.
they called elders? The session. Thanks, Maisie. Anyway, so they're all sitting there and they were asking us questions, and this is like the hour before the service. Anyway, they got to me and they said, do you believe in faith? Like I said, my works. And I felt Janie, the girl next to me, just going. Well, the men, I mean, it was like, the only other time there was a big exodus from the table was one time when I was at a blackjack table and I didn't know what I was doing. And everybody got up and, so it was something similar to that, but they didn't leave, but they just were all shaking their heads. And Janie reached across me and said, she grew up Catholic and we're working on this and I can help her with this. I would help her with this. And they received me. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't understand how, you know, it just, we're saved by the grace of God. That was a news for me.
No matter how many Hail Marys you said.
No matter how many litanies, no matter how, even though
but you have to
Ginger couldn't
respond.
say.
I mean, there's the thing, so we talked about grace 2 weeks ago, and the grace falls on everyone, and yet there's a response that we have. We accept God's grace, and God's mercy, and God's forgiveness, and God, but you have a response. I mean, you can choose to not have any response to that, and that's like some people, again, you know, you're not there yet. God hasn't done God's work in you. But that requires sort of a twist of our head to think, oh, that's already happened, and now what is my response? You know, God is first actor, and then me is responding to God's love.
Okay, so I'm reading these two questions.
Okay,
Where in your life do you most need to seek unity to build bridges at home, at work, at church, or whatever? And then second, what is the necessary step that you must take to build bridges? Right there, that tells me you don't just sit around and do nothing.
right.
You gotta do something. And from that standpoint, we all have to understand what our position is. You've heard the saying that sometimes there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
Mhm.
If we realize that we're Indian, supposed to, if you think of a football team, there's only one quarterback, okay? There's only one punter, there's only one place kicker, there's one center, but they all play their role to build unity for the whole team.
Right.
Is seeking, let's say the Super Bowl is heaven, there's a salvation. We're all trying to do it, but we gotta do our part to build the bridge among everyone among us so that we are collectively being saved or salvation. So we all have to know what our role is and do the best we can at that role. And even if we don't win the game, we did what we were supposed to do. And so,
Because you know what happens if we don't, right? If the quarterback doesn't do the quarterback's job,
and the blocker doesn't block.
right, then definitely, unless there is a miracle.
Well, there's a Hail Mary play too.
Yeah.
But
I know that you go so far, but it's a very good one, thank you.
It is a good one.
Thank you, so thank you. Well, where at most do you need to build a bridge? You know, these are not questions that I like you have to answer in this space, but I think these are questions we need to answer. Like, just for fun, I don't know, like solving every day's crossword puzzle. What is the question that will that will propel you through today? How many bridges do I need to build? How do I need to repair that? What is God's part? What is my part? And I like these questions, not in that I need you to write out your answers for me, but in that it must be true. Right? Like, I have a strained relationship with my mother, right? I always have. So I know in the back of my mind, I am trying to build a bridge there. Now, a grandbaby, in her case, a great grandbaby, is helping. Thing we share, this baby. And I can, we can talk around the other differences. Will it ever be perfect? I highly doubt it. But it would be better to have a bridge that we can walk across.
Well, in building a bridge, you've got to have some know yourself and have mutual respect for the other person. So you can understand where they're coming from, they can see where you're coming from, and you can work together.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Bishop Little's example, of course, is, his stance on whether about Bishop Robinson or, ordination of people who, different sexuality. So he goes into 7 or 8 pages on that in this chapter. It's a bridge, and he's very aware of the bridge and what his attempts to do were, and to explain it, and to know that people were going to be differing from him. Many people differ from him. But he's still in the church,
Our church in Florida, Joe and I are so amazed the first time that we came here. People did a lot of stuff, but mostly by putting money behind it.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't a lot of boots on the ground. There were some boots on the ground, but they were the same boots. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people just peeling money out, and that was a concern for everybody, was how much money they could raise here and there. The church we go to in Florida has maybe 36 people. We have a huge building because before the Episcopalian split, it was the Evangelical Center for the Panhandle. So we've got this huge thing with this little group of people that sit. Now, we don't, the budget for this church, they would faint if they could see it. And we do use the money, but there's something about that place that they cook every day for the homeless. And we don't call them homeless, we call them our guests. And we have places for them to sleep, we have showers, we have grocery stores with free food in the church. Everybody is there. And right now the bishop wants to sell the land because it's on the ocean, and he would bring over $8 million to the diocese. And he and I, we don't get along too well, but it's such a different thing. I mean, the people there would be glad to have some of the money that we have here. But because they don't, we have little pots where the ceiling leaks. I mean, you're familiar with the building in the church.
Yeah.
But we have this blue door, and the list is up there, and people just bring in what they can. And it's amazing to me that these people who are now aging out continue every day to be hands-on. And
is this small group left in the church? What's left after the breakaways? Yeah, was left.
There were 12 left out of 350.
Gotcha. I got you. I'm from Charleston.
And and I will tell you that some of them were the Morgans. I don't know if any of you know enough about civil rights, but the Morgans and That's a man's name, Julian Bond, and his wife, I mean, that's required the people that stayed. So, I mean, you do have incredible, most of the men are gone now, but they died, but the lives are still there. But it really wore you out after a while. We just got exhausted, you know. And yet I turn around and I see those who are exhausted too, but they're still doing it. And so it's a strange thing about whose salvation. When I read that, and of course that story that he tells about the church that gave all the money to that, and I thought, I know who those people are. But so we're just, you know, the salvation, does it look different to God when with different kinds of salvation? I'm not sure that
I don't know. We can judge what the motivation behind the different kinds of service people give, you know, who's to say, I mean, these two churches, serve, but serve, and is it just because it's easier to give money than to give your time? Or is it sacrificial giving is just, I don't know, like, we can't know what's in people's hearts and minds sometimes.
Well, what is? Get Kevin? I mean, right, so exactly, that's what I'm saying, so, and I can't gauge your motivation, or I can't, because I have to gauge my own motivation, like, that's enough right there.
Absolutely.
Let me gauge my own motivation. And whose team do I, and I'll use David's analogy, I mean, whose team do I wanna play on, with, for?
Well, during this season of pledging, you know, it's, in some cases, people have the resources of the money to give, where others may not have and give their time and talent. So there's differences among all of us. Some may not be able to physically do things, but can do it financially. And others have the time and talent to give their services. So in essence, they're all doing what they can do.
Okay, anything else on chapter 6? Because we do have another chapter. Like with the ominous title, Light and Darkness. Of course, and to him, we know that, darkness and light are both alike. That's what we say, but I don't know if that's what he's doing in this chapter. So this is, he's using as his text, Philippians 2 again, and verses 14 through 18. David, could you read that?
Which one?
Philippians 2, 14 through 18.
Do all things without murmuring and arguing, so that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, in which you shine like stars in the world. It is by your holding fast to the word of life that I can boast on the day of Christ that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. But even if I am being poured out as a libation over the sacrifice and the offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. And in the same way, you also must be glad and rejoice with me.
Amen.
Sounds like a tall order.
It's going back to David's analogy of the football team. If one of the players is falling down on his job repeatedly, the response of the team. He's letting the team down, which I suppose in the analogy is God or God's people, the church. Or, the response of the team is to not boot him out, but to work with him.
Sure enough, let's get back to work.
Try to bridge that gap he's created by whatever it is. I don't know, I'm just trying to, because in the church we have flaws and we have weak areas or, and how does that apply in that way about what we do about that? Or how
We don't
handle it?
condemn, we just encourage them to do the right thing.
Right, and support them where they're coming from, or whatever. I don't know.
The truth is just.
Go there.
Mhm. So he uses the image of the lighthouse,
Loved it.
and is that how you see yourself, is the question I asked. Do you see yourself as a lighthouse? His analogy is about a parish who, you know, received some message from an unlikely source about their ability to be a lighthouse to the community in terms of money raised and money given and ministry sponsored.
I don't know that we received as dramatic a message as they did, but this story reminded me a lot of Good Shepherd.
Yeah.
I think so.
And not just because we have a big outreach effort and the barn and all of that, but it spoke to the overall, I think, understanding of what our mission is and what our individual callings are and so forth. So, and I do think we stand out as a somewhat of a lighthouse.
I think so. Well, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
Way back, we've just grown and got.
In Florida, is that it was the original lighthouse. The steeple for the boats to guide the fishing boats in. And that's gonna be a cool thing to help that Bishop Pierce sit down and do back. And it's still, it's the steeple of the church. And, when I read this, I just went, you know, that's what that church really is, a lighthouse, and it's that's why I just thought this chapter was, these two chapters were really good. I like it.
What a great, image that is for that church to have that physical being as a lighthouse.
Used to guide the fishing boats in.
You know, for me personally, I think if somebody had asked me over the years, have you been saved? My response would have been, yes, I have been. But I don't think I really felt fulfilled until I joined this church and got involved in so many different activities. And that was part of we've been out for so long, I really miss that more than anything. I mean, the people, yes, but just being able to be part of something, yeah. So, yeah, I think I'm sort of like you, Sharon, you know, salvation was the religion part, the works part, and for me, it's been, for me to feel truly fulfilled, has been the works part at this church.
Well, I think that what's in this chapter, Bishop Little says, Paul says that it's both identity and vocation. So who we are and where do we, you know, we talked about vocation last year in sort of like where our great joy meets the world's great need, right? That's what vocation means.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, who we are, identity. What team are we on? That thing. And then our vocation, which is what Herb was talking about earlier. What are our gifts and ministry and gifts for ministry, and how are we using them? Right now, pastoral care is doing that in like a splendid way. And obviously is a deep need, right? This is what we tapped, is a deep need. And so, both then, I guess, just going back to the whole thing, identity and vocation. I think that can help give us some structure to where we find ourselves in this whole fear and trembling part in salvation, what we need, so.
I don't have those supplies, but it just crossed my mind and I'm gonna
You're
say.
gonna say it, okay.
Most, churches that I've been involved with have been, as you say, it mentioned a few people doing all the work. And to me, the fact that this idea was thrown out to this church about the pastoral care, that 52 people came forward and that work that needs to be done in any church is spread out over a large group of people who have come forward and said, I'll do a piece of that. And so most churches have a few people they know they can count on, and those people get warmed to enough. But I just love the fact that in this small church, that many people said, I'll give a part of my life. I'll give some of my time. And then so much can be done when that many people participate. So, just.
Yeah, that's it, no, that's it.
I mean, if y'all have noticed, Rob and Allison are highlighting one of the ministries here at church that you can get involved in every Sunday now. And guess what? There are not enough Sundays in this year. Rob, wrote them all out for me, so we could have some prep time. And there's like, Allison, I'm gonna say 68,
Yeah.
72 different things, from Flower Guild to Altar Guild to, a good example, Kate's taken, Pat Rowe to get her hair done today, and then Joe is picking her up. And
That's
she has
great.
three.
She's so excited to get it done and joyful.
She has 3 light bulbs that are out, and he's gonna change those when he gets.
And he washed her car. And he cooked with her. All those
And
things.
We cooked with.
Yes, we did.
Oh.
Anyway, there's lots of ways to get involved, and I feel like our church does a pretty good job.
You look at the barn, look how many people involved in the barn. And look how many people stepped up to, for the barn campaign. I mean, we had almost as many people participate in the barn campaign as do in the annual pledge drive we have. That's amazing.
Now we have more. Right now, there are more people who gave to the barn than have given to the annual giving.
Well, so far this year, but historically, there'll be more, so. But it's amazing that it's even that close to me, so.
I think it's wonderful.
All right, so-
On and on, so.
So here's a question from Bishop Little. How do you articulate your identity as a Christian and as a child of God? What is distinctly Christian?
Sharing God's love.
Love.
Love, yeah.
Putting others in front of self.
Being aware of people's needs and how can it help fill.
No, okay. Anyone else? A lot of these questions make me think, like, what if I had to answer that? Like, really, I might be, so, but like, when Lynn asked me, what is grace exactly?
Oh, thank you I read it.
Yeah.
It helped.
Did it help?
Thank you
And I was
very
able to put it down more,
Yeah.
articulate
Yeah.
it much
Yeah.
more clear.
Yeah.
But I thought about how often we use words like that, and then we take the meaning for granted, or we use it in a way and we we don't have a shared perhaps lexicon, like with everyone else, where maybe we're not, maybe we're using the word differently than others use it, or, right? Like your family could have rituals that you do that you might think everybody's doing that, but they're not, you know, and that's like the way your family's been doing it, but not everyone else does it that way. So I think it's that same thing, and I thought, what a great way to talk about some of the ways we see our faith and live out our faith and understand our faith. Yeah. How has God surprised you by enabling you to see the presence of Jesus in unexpected people or situations? Where does it say that?
Well, this wasn't totally
Page
unexpected.
77, if you're looking in your book.
This wasn't totally unexpected, but for those of you who don't know, and maybe a lot of you don't, but Patch lost all of his chickens night before.
I know.
And, my husband was the first person he called, because they've gotten to be really good friends, and Kevin unfortunately was on jury duty, and so it was just Patch that found him. But Gary asked Patch if he wanted him to come over, and he said, no, you know, I'm okay. Well, my husband did end up going over, and, you know, we were talking about it later on. I said, but Patch, you know, said he didn't really want you to come, and my husband said, yeah, but I needed to go and give him a hug. Oh, and I thought, how many?
It was
men-
really hurting about that.
Yeah, my husband, well, it hurt, you know, because he walked out and,
He could have had a new light for the warmth on a cold night. And I don't know if he ever figured out exactly what the next one they were on.
it had some sort of a warning on the package, but he didn't see it, that you shouldn't use it in around
Enclosed.
in an enclosed.
All the chickens died?
Yes.
So they full-size chickens?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, he lost all of them, so.
And he was very clever. I mean, you know, he liked them.
Oh, yeah, they were their children.
Yeah,
And I identified that. I had chickens that I loved.
Yeah, I know.
That would be devastating to walk out and find them all.
well, he was, yeah, when he talked to Gary,
But your point was that Gary went.
In spite of,
yeah.
because that's so.
Gary was right,
Inside-
he did need a hug.
He did need a hug, absolutely, he did need a hug, and I was really proud of my husband
Uh-huh.
for saying I went because I realized he needed a hug.
I'm proud of him too, thank you.
That's
He
great.
did. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And maybe y'all could take that with you as you go today,
Yeah.
to be looking for that unexpected presence of Jesus in someone that, again, the word unexpected, where God shows up. I'm gonna say it that way. There's God showing up.
Find unexpected ways
Yes.
we can surprise somebody.
Look at that.
You know?
I don't think it surprised me, but I see the presence of Jesus when I see a young baby.
You see what?
Just ask
A child, a baby.
A new baby.
Yeah.
There's something that's,
I mean,
yeah.
So pure.
yeah,
Well, can I just tell a
sometimes.
story?
sure.
Hey, that's.
Right. My youngest daughter, Avery, went to a college called Washington and Lee.
You know that.
Okay, some people don't, I guess. And, when you go to that school, if you're a freshman, the freshmen have to go and spend a week together reading a book and climbing a hill and rowing boats and bonding. And so they had a form at the end of that week and saying, what did you gain from this experience and how did you like it? And Avery wrote, nothing, and I didn't. Oh, God. And when she told me, I thought, God, can I get my money back? Because they're gonna kick her out, I'm sure, at this point. Then she called me and said, I've been called to the dean's office, and I said, are you surprised? And so she went over there, and the dean said, you know, I've been doing this for years, Avery, but I have never received a sheet of paper that says this. Why did you think it was no good? And she said, because she said there are so many things out there that group of people could have been doing for that week that we could have bonded. We could go into the city and we could help clean up part of the city, and there are parts of the city that need painting. I've seen that. And we could have done that, and we could have, gone to there's a veterans retirement home there. And she said, I bet that they would have loved to have had us come there. And she said, now that, I would have told you it was wonderful. Reading a book I can do by myself, and rowing a boat I've been able to do since I was little. And she said he sat there for what seemed to her like an hour, just looking at her. And he looked and he said, okay, Avery, I am giving you $50,000. And what you're gonna do with that $50,000 is set up a program to be offered to freshmen. While the other thing is going on, they can choose which they want to do. But you're responsible, and you're the one who has to set it all up and put it all together. And I said, how many times have I ever told you, don't make suggestions? Because they will say that's great and you do it.
Yeah.
When she was a senior, her budget was about $300,000. So she had kids, and nobody signed up for the other kind anymore. She had them going to cities all over and cleaning and staying in churches or whatever, homes, and that is one of those things where you just,
I'm proud of her.
well, obviously I am too, but it was such to see the results and to see how it built, and to not think that God wasn't involved in that is,
God's presence was with her all along.
all along. Of course, she says, well, part of that's my Jewish. I said,
Well, that's okay
oh,
too.
that's great, but I mean, she's funny about stuff like that. But, it was amazing, and I think of her being in that conservatory school that I kept saying, there would be no trouble here. That this ended up being a lighthouse.
Yes, absolutely.
It's amazing. That is a great story.
That is good.
But may it all be for all of us, that you would find the thing that you can speak up about, and
having the courage to take responsibility that she took on.
right,
Sometimes I think we need the courage to let go.
the courage to let go. Yeah, and how would you, what is it that you'd like to let go of?
Mean people.
You'd like to let go of them? You don't have any control over them, baby.
I know, that's why I let go.
Okay, good, eyes on the rifle arm, there you go.
That's all I can do, that's all.
Sharon? No, Laura, sorry.
I was just gonna say-
Sorry.
Remind people about church and lunch.
Yeah, there's church today at 12 o'clock, where we'll remember all the faithfully departed,
Yeah.
with the Eucharist. Michael will be there, so we can sing some hymns. And then there's lunch. So it's the best deal going. I don't know about it.
Well, that's important too.
You know, but go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and next week we're gonna read chapter 9.
About 8.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do part 3. Sorry. We're gonna start part 3, which is chapter 3 in Philippians, okay? Confidence in Jesus. So I think we're gonna do 8 and 9 next week. All right? Knowing Jesus and growing in Jesus. Remember, this is a book for you, not a book for me. I mean, I'm enjoying reading it with you. So I hope that you can see where it rubs up against your own life. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you.